Dr. Rosalind Eartha Ambrose, née Baptiste, is a Vincentian. She attended the Girls' High School, the alma mater of her mother, Beryl Baptiste, NBE, and her sister, Honorable Renée Baptiste, CMG, LLB, and her two daughters. During her years in the Girls' High School, Dr. Ambrose served as form captain, vice house captain of Moffat House, prefect, and was the captain of the Girls' High School netball teams both in her junior and senior years. Following graduation from the Girls' High School, she migrated to Seattle, Washington, USA to attend North Seattle Community College, 1972 to 1976, where she completed an associate degree in applied science and simultaneously qualified as a certified medical assistant clinical. In 1976, she transferred to the University of Washington, Seattle, Washington, and completed her BA in vertebrate zoology. And in 1979, she gained acceptance to the St. George's University of Medicine and was awarded a scholarship through the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, becoming one of the first Vincentians to qualify as a medical doctor from that institution. Her clinical training years took her to the UK, where she completed her clinical work at the Royal Hampshire County Hospital, Winchester, and conducted clinical electives in New York and Detroit, USA, and also at the University of Western Ontario Hospital in Canada. It was during her final year of medical school that she met and married Mr. Dennis Ambrose, JP of Trinidad, a cartographic draftsman by profession. Upon her graduation from the St. George's University in 1983, Dr. Ambrose returned to St. Vincent and the Grenadines to begin her service as a medical intern and physician until the end of 1984. In 1985, she relocated to Trinidad, being granted a position as a trainee radiologist. In 1988, she was awarded a Commonwealth Scholarship under the auspices of the Commonwealth Scholarship and Fellowship Plan, and was accepted by the Prince of Wales Hospital in Shatin, New Territories, Hong Kong, to pursue specialist training and qualification in diagnostic radiology, becoming board certified by the Royal College of Radiologists, UK, in October 1991. During her tenure in Hong Kong, she was appointed as honorary clinical tutor, then visiting lecturer in the Department of Diagnostic Radiology and Organ Imaging, 1988 to 1992. Upon completion of her training and contract in Hong Kong, Dr. Ambrose returned to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. From 1993 to 1995, she was appointed Senior Registrar at the Department of Radiology at the main hospital, then named Kingstown General Hospital. From 1995 to present, she is the Consultant Radiologist and Head of the Department of Radiology at the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital. In March 1998, she opened the Caribbean Medical Imaging Center, a medical imaging facility which introduced the first CT scan service to St. Vincent and the Grenadines 14 years ago. She has also pioneered teleradiology across the region and the world since 2004. For this achievement, the CMIC has been featured in the United Nations publication Telehealth in 2005. More recently, Dr. Ambrose has been recognized and published as one of the Caribbean women in science and technology in 2011 by the National Institute of Health Education, Research, Science and Technology by the Government of Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Ambrose is currently the president of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Medical Association and is serving her 6th term, and has been instrumental in introducing a number of community outreach programs, including hearing tests and hearing aids to members of the Cane Grove Golden Years Center, the introduction of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Medical College and Career Exhibition, planning a number of medical symposia. She championed the No Smoking campaign, which won the association an award from the World Health Organization in 2003. Through the Medical Association, she spearheaded the College and Career Exhibition in collaboration with the Ministry of Education. And through the SVGMA's health fairs, she brought focus to the road safety campaign, which culminated in the passage of the seatbelt and helmet legislation. She has also been at the forefront of an ongoing breast cancer awareness campaign from 1990 to present, through several avenues, including the annual Breast Cancer Awareness Pink Cap City Walk, and endeavored to form a human pink ribbon with the participation of several service organizations holding pink umbrellas and recorded by overhead photography, an achievement which was featured in the Journal of Medical Protection Society UK Casebook in 2009. In 2013, for her outstanding contribution to the field of medicine in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dr. Ambrose received the Award of Officer of the British Empire. Ladies and gentlemen, I now present to you Dr. Rosalind Ambrose.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that rather interesting presentation. I do feel very proud of these achievements, given the background of the Girls' High School and the aspiration to be the best that we can be. I'd first like to acknowledge, thank the organizing committee of the local chapter of the GHS alumni for having invited me to make this presentation. Mr. Sean Young and Shannon Durant, who both work at the Caribbean Medical Imaging Center. These are the two people who make all my IT dreams come true. When I've dreamt it, I get them to find where's the app that can help me to do this or that or whatever my dream presents. I wish to thank as well the Ministry of Education and Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Nicole Bonady-Baker, the CEO, Ms. Gilchrist, Mr. Anil Sutherland, and Keith Thomas for their participation in presenting me with the data that I required for this presentation, and at the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Environment, Drs. Jennifer George and Nakisha Lewis and Mrs. Robin for information which I obtained from the Ministry of Health in the preparation of this presentation. These two ministries and these two disciplines are really my professional passion, education and healthcare. I selected to discuss the Millennium Development Goals, and I will do this by way of discussing with you first a little history about the Millennium Development Goals. We'll speak about the goals themselves. And because these are goals that are set for people to aspire to and achieve, there has to be some monitoring and reporting. But I often have a concern about who's reporting. What's being reported? And are we, based on these reports, on our path to achieving these Millennium Development Goals, and hence my initiative about the SVG Barometer? Where are we on this path? in the literature search to come up with the information as to who's doing what, it was quite extensive. And I looked at various reports from the United Nations, the MDG report, the Executive Summary, UNESCO, PAHO, WHO, the World Bank report, Food and Agricultural Organization, quite a list of who are the people reporting, the agencies that are reporting about us, including the Commonwealth Medical Association, and there are some others, but principally these. And PAHO is written in red because PAHO lives in our neighborhood, and of all these agencies, they should really know us best because we have a continual communication and interaction with them. Now, the Millennium Development Goals grew out of the 55th session at the General Assembly at the United Nations in 2000. This is the beginning of the new millennium, when 189 member states adopted a resolution referred to as the United Nations Millennium Declaration. It's usually quite a long-winded document, but basically it stated that at the dawn of the new millennium, the industrialized countries, the so-called First World, would undertake the following. One, they'd reaffirm their faith in the organization, which is the United Nations, and the Charter and all the things that are mentioned in the Charter. And secondly, among all its commitments about world peace and human rights and solidarity and disarmament, etc., they would address some special needs of the least developed countries. Notice we are now called least developed countries and not third world, since it's been decided that third world is actually quite derogatory. We didn't actually get to agree that we would be called a third world. Remember, the first world really represented USA and Europe, even though there are some countries in Europe that are not quite as elite as us. And then the second world, they really just threw all the communist countries in one little block, being the so-called USSR at the time, Cuba, China, and then everybody else, including Asia, was considered the least developed countries. Now, the framework that was developed, it's been identified that there are 8 goals to be achieved by the year 2015. And that for each of these goals, there are going to be 18 targets, things that we ought to get done by the year 2015. And with each of these, there are some technical, some so-called measurable indicators to assess how a country is getting on with this task. The indicators are the people who are going to report on these agencies. There's a consensus of great experts, the United Nations, the IMF, the OECD, and the World Bank, and so on. And these are the folks that are going to report back and say, yep, countries are keeping up with the goals or they're falling behind, and so on. But even when they were conceived, there were people who thought some of these goals are going to be a little difficult to measure. And secondly, it was well realized that some countries just don't respond to these things, but it was agreed that they would not consider that these countries are doomed to fail purely because they don't respond. But then we come to this issue of what's reported. What are the consequences based on what is said? Because remember, we can look at ourselves, but then those folks from those agencies that are going to look at us and report back. So what was at the end of this tunnel? Well, there's quite a list, but I thought the catchiest one was the fact that over $117 billion, billion with a B, of unpayable debt would be written off by 2 initiatives, one called the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative and the Multilateral Debt Relief Initiative. So countries that I would have thought did well would actually get to access this little goodie bag here. And it was foreseeable that very early on, the United Kingdom, who was at the forefront of these initiatives, they would end up canceling about 100% of debts for certain qualified countries. So that's a good target. Well, my assessment, and I had a particular hypothesis about this, I thought the Millennium Goals, I was quite excited about what they are. I thought the intent was good. I figured that they were really quite doable things. And I thought that they help governments to focus on some principal elements of development for each of their countries. But maybe I'm a skeptic because I had some apprehensions about the interpretation of the results. What really are these? I hypothesize that the results are going to be slanted, that some of them are going to actually be distorted, and some of them are going to be frankly biased. And the question came about, could this bias actually be beneficial to St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Or are some of them going to be worthy of a skunk award? Now, 3 things you need to know about skunks. 1, the one that everybody knows, that it's a stinky. 2, they have very poor vision, but nature has helped them with other things, very acute hearing, but their vision is extremely poor. And they're twilight animals. They never function in the brightness of daylight, always at the twilight of dawn or the twilight of dusk. So very hazy in terms of their perception about things. So now how do these goals work? Well, goal number 1 says we need to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. And the target by 2015 was that they would halve the proportion of people whose income is less than $1 per day. The indicator and the reporter for this was going to be the World Bank. They were responsible for looking at it. And the reason this was selected is because it was realized that roughly 2.6 billion people live on less than $2 a day in the world. And 40% of these are in the developing world. So they figure we need to fix that and give people a better level of livelihood. So how did St. Vincent manage this? Well, the government took on in its policies and quite early identified as a priority poverty reduction. And so the first self-assessment since the goals came about was reported in 2007-2008, where it was determined that there are 30.2% of the population was considered poor. But if you looked back in 1996, the previous assessment said there were 37.5% of the people who were considered poor. So we had actually done better over the time into the new millennium. Now our friends who are reporting on us, PAHO says, yep, they agree there's a marked decrease in the proportion of indigent poor, having fallen, their figures show 25.7% in 96 to 2.9 in 2008. So to me, that was quite a good reflection. But they went on to say that an additional 18%, though we are not really poor, we are deemed to be vulnerable. And therefore, they put the target of the vulnerable population at 48%. How they got that? Well, they're 18% plus the 30% from St. Vincent and the Grenadines' assessment, and makes us 48%. Is this data cluster going to be biased or beneficial to us? It's like we need to ask the question, am I poor enough for you? Or are you distracted or slanted by my Nike shoes? We'll see. It further concluded these things, that the highest levels of poverty were found in these areas, Georgetown, Sandy Bay, Chateaubriand, 55.6% and 43.5% respectively, and that our poverty line was $5,523 per annum per adult. That's 15 EC dollars per day, and that works out to be much, much more than $1 or $2 per day. And they set our indigent line at $2,448 EC dollars, and so really we were well above the $1 per day. So to me, we had achieved this goal number 1 of making better than $1 per day. And remember recently the issue in Bangladesh begs to speak to what's about this $1 per day. The other part of goal number 1 was to eradicate hunger. And it says that by 2015, we should have the proportion of people who suffer from hunger. Why? Because 868 million people who are hungry, 852 million of them live in our developing countries. That's a 98.15% of people in the developing world who are hungry. And that approximately 25,000 people die every day from hunger and hunger-related diseases. The indicator, the reporters for this, UNICEF and the World Health Organization. How are we going to measure who is hungry? Well, they looked at the prevalence of underweight children under the age of 5. And that is because 2.6 million children die of hunger every year. Every hour of every day, 300 children die because of malnutrition. But they say the countries probably don't even know that these children are dying like this because it's not recorded on their death certificates. So they can't fix it because they're not really aware that that's happening. Well, it turns out that every minute, 18 people in the world will die of starvation. And more than that, every 3.5 seconds, one person dies of hunger. What that means is the time it took me to say this sentence, one person has dropped dead of hunger in the world. Well, here's an attractive piece of hardware that we need to put in the context of what do countries do with the money that they have for the things they need to do. This is a stealth bomber jet, price tag $1.5 to $2 billion. 1 million deaths can be prevented for the cost of a single stealth bomber. And remember, the deaths can be prevented. And remember that many of these are owned by countries who are supposed to be least developed, like Pakistan and like that. Okay. So our reports now. It says that in the region, meaning Latin America and the Caribbean, as a whole, they say we are on track to meet the target on hunger. The overall proportion of the population that is undernourished, they said, decreased from 13%, which was 59.4 million people in the 1990s, to 10% at the beginning of the decade. So we've done well. The regional averages, they say, don't really reflect in all what's happening in all the countries, because some of the countries that started out at high levels of hunger, they're not moving fast enough to fix this problem and meet the target. Moreover, it says even if the region succeeds in meeting the target, because of population growth projections, Latin America and the Caribbean will still have 40 million inhabitants in 2015 who do not have enough food to eat. Then it goes on that like hunger, undernutrition, meaning low weight for age, is particularly severe in certain places in Central America, and they identify El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua. And in some Caribbean countries, isn't this a hair raiser? Guyana, Suriname, Haiti, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Really? It says in these countries, 10% or more of the under 5 age children show low weight for age. That was a report from someone in PAHO. Why I awarded this a skunk? Why? Because if you looked at the data from the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Health Sector, the Monitoring and Evaluation Report done in the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Environment, monitored, collaborated, and corroborated by the Council, Caribbean Council of Health and Research, and they say in 2011, look at this, for the children who are under 5, who are wasted, they established there's only 0.8% of them. That's not near 10%. If you look at the children who are severely wasted, 0.5, that's not near 10%. And even if you look at the children who are stunted, meaning they're just too small, too short, too lightweight, it's only 0.4%. Math, new math, old math, Renaissance math, doesn't bring this anywhere near 10%. Okay, so what about goal number 2? Each goal was assigned a particular icon, and the one with the little pencil is the one about achieving universal primary education. This was selected because we want to say by 2015 to ensure children everywhere, girls alike, will complete a full course of primary schooling. And the indicators, what they're going to look at the ratio of enrollment in primary education. They will look as well at the children who make it from grade 1 to grade 5 successfully. And then we look at the literacy rates of youngsters 15 to 24 years old, and UNESCO was assigned this responsibility. Why are we looking at that? Over 775 million adults cannot read, so says UNESCO. Countries with the highest literacy rates, it's been determined and for quite a long time, that Cuba has the highest literacy rates in the world, 99.9%, followed by one of the Baltic states, Estonia. They said although literacy rates are rising, it's believed that globally this target would not be met by 2015. And I think we all know why that is. We know this girl. Yeah, we know this girl. This is Malala, who was shot in the head by the Taliban last October because she says she insists that she must be able to read and go to school. Way back at age 11, she blogged under a pseudonym to the BBC about her life in the Swat Valley and the efforts by the Taliban to keep her from learning to read. And that was picked up by a documentary from the New York Times, and then she was subsequently nominated by Bishop Desmond Tutu for the International Children's Prize, and right now she is the youngest running nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, so how about St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Our National Literacy Survey in the year 2000 made 5 major points. 1, it found that only 67.3% of persons who have primary education are actually basically literate. Secondly, it said that over 60% of our students were 2 years behind their chronological age. So at age 10, they were reading like an 8-year-old, and so they were not functionally literate. It also found that there was a strong correlation between the reading habits and the literacy competencies in our young people, and that a consistently higher level of literacy was found in those kids who read frequently as compared to those youngsters who didn't do that. It found as well that the reading failure actually began in kindergarten, and unfortunately it was compounded until the children made their way through the educational system. Well, a group went looking around the Caribbean at how is education doing and are we really getting anywhere near our goals, Deborah, and they published divergent academic paths in rural Caribbean village children. And for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they said it was found that the children's achievements, their academics, behavioral patterns, their cognitive abilities at early as age 8, when they're in grade 3, was a useful predictor as to how these children will succeed or fail as they move through the educational system. Well, we all know that really, from 2002, the government in St. Vincent made very aggressive moves with these international partners, the European Union, the GLP, which is a Global Literacy Project, to ambitiously and aggressively deal with reading and writing in this country. So that by 2005, the government had enriched this literacy program and the support programs based on these particular objectives, that they intended to increase the level of literacy substantially from a baseline. And we all know that a lot of little catchy programs came about, which the kids were very enthusiastic about, hats off to reading, learning resource centers, and so on. The intention was to improve the provision of books and learning materials through IT and the One Laptop per Child program. Well, this was actually conceived by a prof in MIT, and he originally thought, Nicholas Negroponte, that he could access lots of old computers, refashion them, and then spit them out to the third world. And initially when it started, I think governments and people didn't take him so seriously, but as time went by, it caught on, and now we know that that is a big and much more successful global program. They also, this government said, to increase the management efficiency by encouraging more teacher training, more home and school partnerships, and so on. And so these were all maneuvers to fix our problem. Well, the statistics reveal that the net enrollment for primary level is 99.8% for both genders, males and females, in St. Vincent and Grenadines by 2007. So that 92% of students who had completed school, and mostly we see males, we know about the male underachievement and the naughty little boys that are running about, but for 80% to 103 in females, and so kids were really in school. That for a country of 110,000 people, we have 68 primary schools. So really that should translate into universal primary education. 26 secondary schools, and 5 of them were built under the initiative of the Education Revolution, and numerous preschools shot up around this country. So really, by 2007, when the next reading assessment program was done, yes, there was a marked improvement in reading abilities. Yes, there was, John, 58.6% of grade 6 students were now reading at or above the grade 6 level. And so I figure that we were actually had done well in our path to the Millennium Goals number 2. And if we look at the sex disaggregated literacy statistics for the 15 to 24 age group, we're doing pretty good. 88.2% of males and 89.5% of females, with an overall national literacy rate of 84%. So we have actually done quite well in terms of the Millennium Goal number 2. And what about GHS? Well, we got started 100 years ago educating girls. So we don't have that Malala problem. How does goal number 3 work? Well, it says to promote gender equality and empower women. And the target was to eliminate gender disparity in education. And they say countries should be able to do it by 2005 and certainly by 2015. And the indicators they would look at is, what's the ratio of girls to boys in primary, secondary, and tertiary? We got a big check mark for that because we're done with that, cover that. The ratio of literate men to women, well, women were always ahead in this country in that 15 to 24. Yep, we've achieved that. And now we need to look at the proportion of seats held by women, because we're talking about equality and empowerment. And that the IPU, the Inter-Parliamentary Union, would look at that particular parameter. And then there's this number 4, which is to improve the share of women in wage employment in the non-agricultural sector, and the ILO had taken the responsibility for that. Well, for number 3, the World Bank reported that the Arab states, they have and still do the lowest share of women in parliamentary seats, only 13%, and they also have the lowest female labor rate in the world. But look at this. In the other groups, India, the world's oldest democracy, still has lower than Pakistan in terms of gender equality. Well, the government of St. Vincent did, in fact, commit to strengthening gender equality, and strengthening is the key word, not introducing, strengthening, and promoting empowerment of women. They signed up to this Quito consensus in 2010 when all the 10th regional conference on women was held in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the Quito consensus basically agreed by 36 governments that they would pave a way for judicial reform, get more female representation into public and political posts, and that they would establish a comprehensive public and social security system to help to improve women's quality of life and ensure your rights as a citizen. Well, women in political positions have increased in this country, and the number of women in parliament in the region has increased from an average of 5% in 1990 to 20% in the year 2010. I figure that's a good big jump for the region. But guess what? What about this issue of empowering women? Reported in Health in the Americas under St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it says that between 2006 and 2010, a total of 23 women died as a result of gender-based violence. That 2,005 cases of rape were reported between 2006 and 2009, that 200 cases of sex with a minor, and 29 cases of incest. This is a quote from this report. Now, looky here. I gave this a skunk report, a skunk reward. Why? We are speaking about women in shared employment in the non-agricultural sector. Where does that reflect women in the non-agricultural sector? In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there are more female physicians and vets than males. Oh, get it, Sean. Go back, go back. It always aims to do that. Click. There are more female vets than there are physicians and vets than there are in the thing. Okay, I'm here to overrule you. Come on. Take it over. Yes. But it only is only coming upon the transition. Okay. But there are more women who are physicians and vets than males in St. Vincent and Grenadines. Nearly half the dentists are females. More female lawyers than males in this country. The longest serving Attorney General in St. Vincent is in St. Vincent and Grenadines. There are more principals of schools and teachers who are females in this country. More heads of departments in the public service are female. Many of the financial institutions want to tell me that 49% of their senior management are females. More females in the uniformed service, in clergy, electricians, engineers. These are non-agricultural sectors. Why is this not reflected in that report? That's why I awarded this a skunk, and I gave us a nice trophy for that achievement under empowering women in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So how did we do with number 4, the child mortality, reducing child mortality? Why? Because we say that child mortality, we need to look at deaths before age 1. And the target was that they should be able to reduce by 2/3 the under 5 mortality. UNICEF and WHO were going to look at that. And they're looking at the proportion of 1-year children who are immunized, because such a large number of children die because of measles in particular. And even Britain has a problem with this now. And we don't have any problem with immunizing our children. The highest mortality rate in the world is recorded in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the lowest being in Finland, Singapore, Iceland, and Japan. In 2011, the Caribbean statistics reveal, get back the arrow please, Sean. The Caribbean statistics reveal that in St. Lucia there are 14, in Dominica 11, Trinidad and Tobago 25, Barbados 18, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines had 20 infant mortality deaths. No information from Bermuda, Turks and Caicos Islands, but we don't know if it's really that they are not getting there. Between the age of the mortality rate varied from 17 to 22 infants per 1,000 live births in St. Vincent. And if you look under 5, it was 19 to 25 to 23 under age 5 deaths in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So we are 20, while the rest of the region is at 25. So we're actually doing pretty good with our infant mortality. We are not as badly off as some of the other areas in the Caribbean. So what about immunization? This MMR is measles. We have between 99% and 100% immunization of our children for measles. So we don't have this problem of what is our immunization coverage in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and so we are doing really quite well with this parameter. If we then go to look at the maternal health, which is also a problem in the world, and that is because maternal health, we consider women during pregnancy, during their childbirth, and postpartum. And the target by 2005 is to reduce by 3/4 the maternal mortality ratio. And the indicators were being reviewed by UNICEF and the World Health Organization. And they would look at how they were going to measure this, one, by the number of women who died during these three times, and the proportion of births that are attended by skilled health personnel. Well, in St. Vincent and Grenadines, you know, we have actually conquered that goal. But if you look at the rest of the world, it is established by those indicators, the reporters, the UNICEF and UNESCO and the World Health Organization, that 1,000 women die in the world every day because of complications of pregnancy and childbirth. That out of those 1,000, 570 are in sub-Saharan Africa, 300 in South Asia, and unfortunately 5, they say, in the higher income countries. And what they die of is really severe bleeding, hypertensive disorders, unsafe deliveries, abortions, and no skilled personnel at delivery. Well, in 2010, the latest measure showed that 287,000 women died worldwide because of poor maternal health. That's more than double the population of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. However, it said it represents a decline from 1990, but they claim that this target is far removed from where the world should be in 2015, and that the mortality rate in these developing countries still remain 15% higher than the developed world. Well, here in 2011, 971 women who were seen in this period of pregnancy and delivery and postpartum, they all have antenatal visits in this country. The majority of them, 68%, will in fact go to a clinic, at least by mid-pregnancy. And certainly in the postpartum, after delivery, more than 85% of them actually use our public health clinics to follow up so that we don't actually have the problem of the postpartum deaths. And here, this is a graph from the Ministry of Health. Babies' births delivered by skilled personnel, practically 100% once you're at the hospital and at the health clinics. Health clinics are all manned by certified midwives, so we have safe delivery each time and we don't run into the difficulty that they have in some of the other developing countries. Where are we with AIDS, which is the sixth Millennium Goal to combat AIDS, HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other diseases? Well, the goal is that, and TB is in this target, to halt, stop HIV, and begin to reverse the trend, the spread of HIV/AIDS. And these indicators would be looked at by UNAIDS, WHO, UNICEF, and they would measure, they would look at the prevalence among pregnant women between 15 and 24 years of age. The target is to halt it, reverse it, because 1.4 million children, when it comes to malaria and infectious diseases, 1.4 million children die every year because of malaria. We don't have malaria in this region, but there are a lot of incentives in Africa to try and intercept this problem. Even with Bill Gates saying he'll give so many mosquito nets, well, the people who are to sleep under those nets say, look, pal, you're giving us those nets, but they're like ovens. So we're still going to sleep outside. The mosquitoes are still going to bite us. You need to give us anti-malarial drugs. They figured there was insufficient consultation in that initiative. See, that's about the reporters. You're out there looking in. You think that's what I need. You didn't ask me. See? Prevalence and death associated with TB, we can measure that because TB is one of the things that we have, not malaria, and we can look at how our cases are detected and cured. Now, between 2010 and 2011, the number of women testing positive in St. Vincent and Grenadines were 35, and that is a decline from what the figure was in 2008 and 2009. Of those 35, unfortunately, 14 of these were repeat pregnancies, and 21 were new pregnancies, and even more unfortunately, 13 of these were between the age 15 to 24. So we have something to deal with here. In terms of the TB, we are in fact making some headway with this. We have a high detection rate, we have a good cure rate, and it could be better. As we know, males kind of stay at home and don't come till it's really late, so we have more of them than females who are affected by this condition, and youngest being 18, oldest 76, and our predominant age is 35 to 55, but at 80% detection rate, I figure that is quite good. Once you get above the 50% mark, we are good with the TB tracking. So how about number 7, to ensure environmental sustainability? There were multiple targets for these two goals. They say we want to integrate the principles of sustainable development in countries. We want to reduce the loss of environmental resources. They would look at land area by forests, and the World Conservation Monitoring Center was given this assignment. But we know in St. Vincent, wow, we got this problem of bushfires. So we're losing not only properties, but good and environmental resources, our small animals, and so on. We may soon burn out all our gooties and iguanas by people lighting bushfires, which is unfortunate. But by 2015, they said that we should be able to halve the number of people who have without sustainable access to. So here are the things in environmental sustainability: safe drinking water, basic sanitation. UNICEF and WHO look at that. They want to improve sanitation both between urban and rural areas, and to deal with the issue of slum dwellers, and that has to do with housing. Well, some facts about this environmental sustainability. Over 780 million people in the world still drink unsafe water. 3.4 million people die every year because of water-related diseases. And guess what? 99% of those deaths are in the developing world. So here we go. Every 12 seconds, a child dies of water-related illness. So before we can say that, kid has died because of water-related illness. And that women will spend 200 million hours a day, if you measure women around the world, in all the countries, collecting water just to have access to safe drinking water. Well, in St. Vincent and Grenadines 2010, it was well established that 98% of our population has access to clean drinking water. We don't have a water problem. In 11.6% of households are connected to the public proper sewer system. 56.6% had sewer tanks, and 30.3% were still using pit latrines, but there is access to something, and stuff is not dropped along the side of the road to be careless and harmful. Okay? I've been to countries like that, and I couldn't wait to leave that city. I could feel it coming on. It was frightening. 2006 to 2008, Solid Waste Management Unit claimed that they've collected garbage at least once a week from 100% of households in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. They said that we dispose, which I find this is a phenomenal number, 50,301 million metric tons of garbage in 4 landfills in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. What is a million metric ton? 100 million pounds, like a pound of sugar, is a metric ton. That is a lot of garbage, folks. We got to fix that. We really, because in no time our landfills would have just really exceeded their capacity. By 2020, it says we should be able to achieve improvement in the lives of slum dwellers. This is what the goals would like to see, because for over 100 million slum dwellers, they need to fix that. And notice that this target is extended from 2015 to 2020. That is because of the scale of this particular problem, and that they would get the UN Habitat to look, check around the world to see where do people have access to secure tenure. Well, we know in St. Vincent and Grenadines we have lots of housing projects, so people have access to secure tenure. So we've conquered this, and we don't have those slums where our children are climbing over landfills to find a slice of bread and a 40-day-old piece of sausage. So we don't have this problem of slums as they have in some countries. Well, what about the Global Partnership for Development? This is Millennium Goal number 8. This one has many more targets than any of the others. It says we need to have open, rule-based, predictable trading and financial systems. Well, they're probably talking a little bit more to the economists, but I figure that they need to make it so that people have more access to financial systems and be able to trade predictably so there's no shadiness on one side versus another. We need to be open and reflective about that. That we need to address this. They would need to address the special needs of, this is least developed countries, and we're now also called the LICs and the LINKs. Low-income countries and low and medium-income countries. No more third world. Okay, so we look at the targets and the quotas in terms of what are our needs to get global relationships going, and to provide enhancement for debt relief by these heavily indebted poor countries and cancel official bilateral debt. Those are the goals under the Global Partnership. It went on to say that for this, we need to have better market access and trade. They hope that that would happen, that we can increase aid and have affordable medicines. And this affordable medicines things gets tagged to target number 17, which you'll see in a minute. We also need to look at developing and implementing strategies for decent and productive work for youth. Well, you do remember that in 2002, 2003, in the early days, we had the YES program, which was to introduce youngsters, and I think some people didn't get this, that it was intended to introduce youngsters to decent and productive work. It was not intended to give them million-dollar work contracts, because these were people who didn't know, and I know because I was one of the first private sector people to say, I'll take a YES person. Unfortunately, youth, I don't mean to be getting on you, but many of you don't understand that when you walk into a room, you need to say, good morning. And you need to understand that when somebody says to you, even if 5 other people are sitting there, that when someone says good morning, they expect you to respond. You shouldn't be sitting there thinking, oh, she ain't talking to me, me and she, so you won't answer. This was a report from somewhere in the region that says that people from St. Vincent and the Grenadines are lacking in the soft skills. They will hire you, you're a great mason, but you come to the job, you throw your towel in the corner, and you do not say the little thing like, good morning. That will not hurt you. When this YS program said, that was part of the problem. People come and they've not had a job before, they're being introduced into the workplace, they don't know workplace ethics, but they figure I can sit down and drink something here. And it took a lot of integration. People didn't get it, but they wanted to be paid big money. The intention was to introduce you to decent and productive work. So we did that. Now, Target 17 said that we want to have better cooperation with the pharmaceutical companies to provide affordable essential drugs. Well, the only thing where that is happening is for HIV/AIDS. But folks, the cost of cancer treatment the world over, except in some of the less developed countries where people are able to do this, make their own medications, it is phenomenal. And we really need to get better cooperation with pharmaceutical companies. We need to have greater cooperation with private sector to make available benefits in new technologies and so on. And so these are the targets within Millennium Goal number 8. If we then look at now, how is St. Vincent and the Grenadines really doing with goal number 8? Well, in education, we will have a lot of collaboration with the GLP, governments of Cuba, Venezuela, Taiwan, and the Prime Minister has said this, and I've actually managed to document this. We have, of all the Caribbean countries, the most students in more countries than anywhere else in the world. Our students go to countries that some of the kids, they never even heard of. Where is that place? But we have scholarship access there, and students are going to it. We have other organizations like the OAS that has opened up a myriad of scholarships in areas. The only problem I have with this particular one and some of the others like it is that I think there's a mismatch in the areas that they're offering people to study, because some of them are things that are not so highly marketable in our region. And there's where this will now contribute to the brain drain, because you've had the kid qualify with a PhD in governance and he can't get a job in the region. So he's going to stay wherever he can get a job elsewhere. Infrastructurally, yep, we have a lot of collaboration by various governments or friendly governments that are helping us with bridges, roads, libraries, schools, and our airport. And what's about the tariff issue? Well, I'm not so sure how that is working out, so I said it's equivocal. But then you ask, is this really the end of the conversation in terms of what can really transpire with infrastructure and technical development? Because remember, we go to so many places in the world, we talk to so many other governments in the world, we say, boy, that's a rich country, and you really believe that you should be able to get something from there. And then what's at the end of the conversation? We've spoken, but then we haven't actually concluded anything from it. So how does the barometer work? Well, for goal number 1, globally, they say yes, they could achieve goal number 1, but only between 47 and 27%. For St. Vincent and Grenadines, we've done that. We do not have this problem of hunger and poverty as reflected by the rest of the world. For goal number 2, they've admitted it's unfulfilled. They will not achieve the universal secondary education globally, primary education globally, but we've done that in St. Vincent. To promote gender equality, we've done that. And they've admitted that particularly when it comes to this empowering women, they will not make that goal, but we've done that. When it comes to reducing child mortality, we have done that. Even though globally they say they can only get to from 12 to 7.7 million in terms of saving child mortality, and we've done that. Our statistic is below the global and the regional margin. Improving maternal health, we've done that. They're still working on it, and they say it's going to be unfulfilled. Why? If you take a country like Afghanistan and Pakistan, where a pregnant woman is basically treated like a bit of garbage, you know that this will not be achieved. And when we talk about combating AIDS and so on, they're working on it, and for infectious diseases and TB, we've got a good margin of detection rate and cure rate in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, so we've done that. Now, how about goal number 7? Globally, they say that for them, it's going to be unfulfilled. We say, yes, we can do it because we have no problem with the sanitation. We've conquered that. We need to slow down the landfill thing. And if you notice that the private sector's got into recycle your bottles and so on. So we need to pay more attention to that initiative and work with it and make it more real. And in terms of the Global Partnership for Development, it's okay. We've already conquered, we've introduced that we collaborate with regional, international, and local partners to work on our Global Partnership for Development. So I figure really, we've done them all. 100% before the year 2015, while they've only accomplished 25% of it. So what about this goodie that we're that's supposed to be there? Well, by 2011, in December 2011, it was said that the heavily indebted country program, that there were 39 countries identified as being potentially eligible to get that debt relief. They said that 36% of them had already received their monies or partial of debt relief. 33 of them were in sub-Saharan Africa. None were in the Caribbean. And why is that? We've done these goals. You gave this assignment. We're handing in our report card. Okay, potentially there's some debt relief, they say, potentially, to these countries, Guyana, Haiti, Honduras. And this week, the IMF recently awarded $207 million of an approved $932 million. Is this outcome, is this a reward based on bias reporting? Is this a prize that you're going to give these countries for having done something? Or is this a Chinese puzzle box where no matter how you twist it, you won't get it right? Here are the reasons why that particular country is getting this money. They have unsustainable debt, so it means they're not fixing their debt problem. They have low competitiveness, and we are bashing ourselves. We need to be more competitive because they have a weak business climate, and this is an explanation for giving them $932 million. And nerve-wrackingly, lack of policy credibility. You mean you couldn't trust me with $5, but you're going to give me $932 million because I didn't get it right. There's something wrong with this. Something very wrong. Could it be things like this? This is the cover to the document called Health in the Americas, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. There's a skunk sitting there. Look at this picture. What is wrong with this picture bearing the name St. Vincent and the Grenadines? I actually looked at this when I read this article, and I even tried to figure out what's the angle of the shot. I said, maybe he stood on Mackey's Hill, and this is the back of the courtyard. But then, if I'm looking at the back of the courtyard, I can't see this waterway. So, when you file this report and you're handing out the goodies, could it be that you don't really know to whom the goodies belong? So really, you have to say of the 8 Millennium Development Goals, the reporting services, I gave them 3 skunks because 40% of the time their reporting was unreliable, unbiased, or totally incorrect. And folks, I am sure that my hypothesis of this is absolutely correct. And so I rest my case.